Hello, Mike Larson here from Amplified Audiobooks, and we have in the studio Rona Swanson, and she is a constant customer and friend of Amplified Audiobooks, and we just got done in the spring recording your first book, and we're going to settle in tomorrow and record your two more books of yours. And you came in, you want to talk about this book that you wrote. This was going to be co-authored with your daughter, right?
It was going to be a joint effort. Once she graduated college, she was going to have a degree in English and psychology, so it was going to be a really fun book that we could work together on.
Yeah. And so what's the book about? Let's just start there. How did it come to fruition?
Well, we had a lot of discussions about young women and her concern for young women. She had returned from her junior year in college studying abroad in England, and she was so saddened by the wreckage that she saw in young women's lives because they thought that the most important thing was to be desired by a young man, and so they surrendered their purity, their virginity, their innocence, their everything. And then when that didn't work out, they were pretty broken. And she was concerned that it just ends up being an endless stream of wreckage. And so she wanted to talk to her own generation about, that you're worth more than that, that you should value yourself more than that. And so we talked about the premise that if you eat fruit before it's really ripe, it never tastes like what it should be.
Oh, wow. That's
and
a great analogy.
The same thing is true for sexual love, that God really does have a design for it. He is not a prude. He isn't wanting to prevent sexual relationship. Only in its right context, though, will it be really fulfilling for us and not break us and not ruin us. And it's an important thing for young women to understand, because things happen to young women that don't necessarily happen to young men in the same way as far as the brokenness that they experience. So
I agree. I heard it said once that girls give themselves away for love, and boys give themselves away because they want sex. And
so they'll pretend
there is a difference, right? And so it's an incredibly timely piece of work that you've got here. So you weren't able to, because let me stop and say this, is that for Rebecca to have these convictions at her age is absolutely a testimony of her upbringing, and that's awesome. And so, because that is not the narrative today, especially in colleges, and very few girls are thinking this way. And so, just an encouragement for you. That's incredibly cool that you guys have raised a daughter that had these convictions and a real desire to do something about it. There's the difference there, right? We can desire to honor God with our lives, but we're also to mourn like sin and the devastating effects of sin. And your daughter did that.
But not in a judgmental way, because she absolutely adored her friends, she witnessed the wreckage. So her heart was so broken over watching the wreckage that was occurring among her own generation in ways that it should not have been.
We need more people convicted over them and loving their neighbor in such a way that they want to see the best for them, and that their heart is breaking when that doesn't happen. And so I think that is actually the Christian testimony that everybody should have. Our hearts should be breaking over the devastation in our country, in our homes, in our schools, in our colleges, and everywhere. And so I'm really encouraged by the fact that you're writing this book. And where can they find this one?
This is on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah. And so Rebecca didn't help me write this book. This is a teeny little, I call it a picture book on sex, which it's not a sex manual, but it's a very simple book, because in the middle of her senior year, Rebecca died in an auto accident, and so we didn't get to write that book together, and I felt so obligated to try to express her heart about this issue. So I put together, in the simplest of terms that I knew, little tiny chapters on sex and where we get our ideas about it and how it all fits into a human being's life, because God designed us to have desire. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing yucky, evil, awful, terrible about it. It's just in its right place. And so this is a way for moms or dads, whoever, to have a discussion with young women about there is a time, and too soon will never be what you think it ought to be. But that's the way all sin, nobody wants to talk about sin, but it's such a sleight of hand trickery, because it always promises something it will never deliver on, that it'll keep you chasing it until you destroy yourself. So I think that's what's happening with sex in our culture, and it grieves my heart. I wrote this in 2009, and when I was thinking about coming down here to do it for an Audible book, I thought, would this even be anything? I think it's even more important in today's culture. It is shocking, the level of just disregard for the sanctity and purity of a woman and her worth in our culture, and it breaks my heart. I have 3 granddaughters now, and it breaks my heart to see that level of depravity.
Well, I mean, this temptation to not trust God and think that God is holding something back from us, has started in the garden, right? When the devil tempted Eve to believe that the fruit was good.
Or that he really said that? You really think that's what he meant? And
so I think those temptations are alive and well more than ever before today. And so this is a timely resource and a needed one. Because we know why this is so timely, it's because sex is people are so promiscuous at this more than ever before, it seems like. What do you say to the young girl that has made the mistake and who has given herself away and is feeling that guilt and that shame from her choice? And what would you say to a young girl like that?
And there are many. And you fell for something that everybody's falling for. I mean, it's such a lie, but it's so pervasive. Our culture promises that young women, if you're hot, if you're desirable, if guys are chasing after you, that's the height. That's where you want to be. And it will absolutely destroy you and leave you empty. I have an example in the book of a friend of mine. I know I'm a lot older, but when I was a young woman, a lot of young women in my generation were very promiscuous, because it was the women's lib movement and everybody could do whatever they wanted to do. And I had a really good friend. I adored her. I loved her heart, but she was incredibly promiscuous. And it made me so sad, because I heard the kinds of things that everybody was saying to me while she was in a back room with somebody, and it just broke my heart. And then later on, I was raising a family with 3 children, and she had had so many abortions and so many things that she could not have a child. She was sterile, and she had no one of significance in her life. So all the things that she thought brought her worth, value, and certainly attention, and there's no doubt about that, left her empty and hurt. And the answer is, and always will be, to come to Jesus and let him restore you. He is the answer to all of the brokenness in all of the world. Because first of all, if you've made a mistake, join the club. There's not anybody anywhere that you've ever met who hasn't made a mistake. So we all have. My prayer is that you won't make this mistake again, that you won't fall for the lie that your worth is in your sexiness, that you won't think that you have to give up something of yourself for somebody to love you. If somebody can't love you just for who you are, you don't have to give up anything, and don't. So, but my prayer would be that you would at least investigate Jesus. Just give him a chance, because he understands. I mean, that's why he came to earth after all. He gets it. We're all broken. We all need fixing. And I wrote this just with the prayer that those who have fallen for that mistake can find hope and peace in Him. And those who have not yet fallen for that mistake maybe will outsmart it and wait for the right time.
Yes. Well, thank you for coming, and thank you for writing this book. I'm certain it's going to bless a lot of young ladies, and parents especially need to pick this book up and take it through. Take your daughters through this. I've got a granddaughter that I'm going to take through this, and with Daddy's permission, of course. And but we're grateful for you. Thank you for writing this book, and get it on Amazon. You can also pick up the audiobook here in a couple months after production, and so we're excited about that as well. Thanks, Rona, for coming.
Thank you. Thank you.